Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio, episode 431. Today, I'm joined by Sensei Gabriel Siu, and we're talking about the challenges of balancing your own training with teaching. It's a great conversation. I know you're going to like it. If my voice is unfamiliar to you, I am Jeremy Lesniak. I'm your host for Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. I'm the founder at Whistlekick, and you can see all the stuff that I and the rest of the team are involved in at whistlekick.com. One of the things you'll find over there is our store. We sell uniforms and shirts and hats and sparring equipment and a bunch of other stuff. And if you use the code podcast15, that will save you 15% off everything you buy. It supports the show and it helps us keep going. If you want to find more about the show, that's a separate website, whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. Nice and easy. And you can find everything from all the episodes we've done, including transcripts, photos, videos, links, you name it, right there, all for free. We bring you 2 shows a week, and hopefully you enjoy them. Hopefully you learn something, and that's kind of the goal with today's episode. In the early days of this show, people would write in, they would have questions, and I would simply answer them. But now, in an effort to bring those questions and the answers, my opinions, back to the audience, when someone writes in with a question, I very often will ask them, hey, would you be willing to come on the show and discuss this? And not everyone says yes. But in this case, that's what happened. Sensei Siu reached out. He's been a listener to the show for a while. And he said, I've got this challenge. I'm having a hard time balancing my training with my teaching. What do you think? And so that's what we did. We talked about that today, dug into some of the challenges of that. I offer some feedback, some thoughts on how he might approach that, how I've approached it in the past. And it was a good conversation. Even if you're not an instructor yourself, I think you'll get something out of this episode. So hang back, take a listen, and here we go. Sensei Siu, welcome to Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's an honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you. This is one of those episodes, listeners, where somebody writes in and they say, hey, what do you think about this? And I kind of dodge the email and I'm like, I just come on the show. Because see, if I write back to people, if I reply to their emails, that's not content that we get to use on the show. Nobody else gets to see that. And I like being a little bit longer form, so I thank you for writing in, and I thank you for, I think you're the third person that's come on with this kind of, Q&A, quote unquote, live format. So thank you.
You're welcome. Cool. I didn't realize it hadn't been that many, but yeah, thank you for responding to my question and for inviting me on the show. I've really enjoyed listening to the episodes and listening to the podcast, and I'm really excited to be here and to talk about this with you.
Well, cool. Yeah, I do. I really try, and as far as I know, I get a lot of email, but unless someone's trying to sell me something or being really lame, I reply to everything. I even reply to the hate, which is very, very infrequent, but I'll still acknowledge, because if someone's going to take the time to email me, I'm going to respond to that. Just like on Facebook on my birthday, hundreds of people wish you a happy birthday. I'm going to reply back to every single one of them. Most of them are just going to get a thank you with an exclamation point. But if somebody writes more than that, I'm going to write back more than that. It feels, there's a bit of a martial arts principle in there. Right? You meet someone where they're at. They give you more and you got to give them back more, or you at least have to receive more. There's some balance there.
Yeah, totally. I get that. And it's from a listener's point of view and a customer point of view and a fan point of view, I really appreciate that. It really makes you stand out, not only as a person, but as a company as well. So thank you.
You're going to make me cry. And I'm not entirely kidding. All right. Before I start weeping on air, because that's not cool. Nobody wants to listen to that. You came on to talk about a question. So if you would tell the audience the question that you had written in.
Sure. The question, a little bit of background, is something that I've struggled with my entire martial arts career. I recently got my black belt, and the thing that I struggled with was, how do I balance teaching and training? and I'm sure we'll get into more of my stories as we go on, but the short version is that I have helped teach really since I was a white belt. And so I've never been just a student.
Mm. Okay. And is that typical in your school that even someone as a white belt will be teaching?
No, that is not typical. Um, the the story behind my story is that my wife, she is a black belt, and she wanted to. She got her black belt um, like 20 some years ago, but her dojo shut down, and she had traveled the world as a missionary and uh, gone off to college and done other things. And everywhere she went, she wanted to teach. She loves to teach. She loves the martial arts. And so when we got married about 9.5 years ago, she wanted to start teaching. She wanted, it was a dream to run her own school. And I'd never done any kind of martial arts before. And so at the age of, I think I was 26, um, 24, somewhere in there. Anyways, um, she started teaching, and I said, great, I've always wanted to learn and I love to teach as well. So let's do this. And we started with a handful of kids, and she kind of resurrected her old curriculum, and we made some changes as we went on. But me being, you know, uh, an adult and married to the black belt, it was only natural that I helped teach as well. And so we would work at home, and she would help me progress ahead so that I could help teach when we were at the dojo, when we were teaching classes. And it was something like I've always enjoyed teaching, um, but the higher in rank that I got, the more I struggled with how do I balance this, because I wanted to train. We did a lot of competing, and I wanted to be good at competitions, but I never had the time. I never felt like I had the appropriate amount of time to commit to just my training, because I was always helping uh, teach and train other people as well.
Mm. Yeah, and of course, the more you learn, the more time it takes to maintain that body of knowledge. Obviously, it takes longer to learn something and to develop a skill than it does to maintain it. But once you've been training for a few years and maybe a bunch of forms and a bunch of techniques, maybe some what in karate are called kihon, or in taekwondo kibon, prearranged sets, and you've got to know all this stuff for you, and you want to know it well enough to teach it, and you're married to the instructor, so you want to know it well enough to kind of honor that relationship. That's a significant amount of time. But of course, you've got family commitments and the time that you're in your dojo, you're teaching, you're training, and you want to do something once in a while that's not martial arts. And there are only
Right.
so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
And so this is a challenge. And the reason I wanted you to come on is because this is a question that not only have I heard before, I've had this discussion with people, I've had this struggle myself. And I'll dash any hopes of a easy answer right up front. There is no easy solution to this. If there was one, you would have learned about it and probably figured it out for yourself, and there wouldn't be a problem. Because the
Yeah.
problem isn't really a problem. The problem is you have multiple things that are important that are similar enough that they feel like they should go together, but they really don't.
Right.
Now, I don't know about you, but I've certainly seen plenty of people who really know certain things, but stink at teaching it. And on the flip
Hmm.
side, I've seen people who are really good at teaching things, but can't do it so well. I'm able to teach certain things that I cannot do myself. I've helped people through gymnastics and through martial arts and through some of the other things I've worked on with physical disciplines, teach people skills that I am not able to do or not very well. Because the ability to do and the ability to teach are two completely different skill sets.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel very blessed to be fairly physically gifted, athletically gifted. I played all the sports: football, basketball, baseball, volleyball. golf, I've soccer, everything. And I've done fairly well at all of those. But coming into martial arts, it's so different than anything else. It's like learning, learning something all over again, and as my wife uh, was teaching me these things, um, there were certain things as I got good at them. I remember one day she looked at me and she goes, "Wow, you are better at that than I have ever been and will ever be." And I think at the time I was like maybe a purple belt or something, which was like halfway to black belt. And it was humbling. I was honored that she would say that, but humbling as well, um, to know that I was so good at something that I felt like I wasn't good at. And so there's always this balance of uh, trying to be good at something, but not feeling like I was good enough, um, with learning, at home on my own or even in class, and then trying to teach it, um, and trying to keep both as high, trying to keep my knowledge as high as possible so I can teach as well as possible, but then trying to keep my own skill as high as possible. And it's just,
Mm.
I feel like I never was good enough at either to feel adequate.
So when you talk about something not being good enough, we're talking about there's a standard you've identified, a certain level that in your assessment you're not at. So, but the question is, where are you getting that level, that standard from? Is it coming from you? Is it coming from someone else?
Man, that's a good question. I think I would say that's coming from me. I'm always my own worst critic, and I never feel like I'm good enough.
Mm,
Um, and that's not necessarily a good thing. There, in one sense, it's a good thing because I'm always striving to be better. But in this case, especially in my color belt, my intermediate rank, it was not a good thing because I was super down on myself, um, super hard on myself, and it was not healthy. It was not a good thing.
right.
And so when I would get depressed with my own performance, that affected that affected my mental commitment to teaching and to our school. And um, it was not a healthy mentality to have. But like my wife will tell you, he goes, you know, you finally started listening to me, over these past few months, maybe this past year, when she tells me you're good. I finally have learned to listen and to believe her.
Have you always been like this? Have you always been your own worst critic?
Um, no, I'm trying to think when that started. Probably late high school, early college years, uh, because I, when I was young, trying to think of how to word this. Um, I always sought to please my coach, my parents, whoever was an authority over me. But I didn't always receive positive feedback from, and it wasn't necessarily one source, but from, I had my share of bad coaches. And just kind of over the years, that it wore on me. And I started believing some of the negative criticism and even amplifying it to myself. And it created a very unhealthy view of myself.
Yeah. Yeah. For all the good that sports do, and I'm throwing martial arts in that
Yeah.
bucket, negative motivation can work, but when it's systemic, it, it doesn't it doesn't give people good tools to use moving forward. So especially with children, especially when you're talking to a kid and saying, "Come on, you can go harder, you can do this." And I guess that's even more. That's still kind of positive when you're telling someone you're not good enough. That go run laps because that was terrible. which, let's face it, is kind of the cliche high school football coach.
Right.
And most of us probably, even if you've watched any movies or TV that have had high school football coaches that are like that, or, maybe you played on a team like that, they've all got a baseball cap on, right? They're always yelling, there's spit in the corner of their mouths, right? It's a cliche for a reason.
Right.
And some people do well with those tools, but there's always a downside.
Yeah. And one of the things I've learned, especially in the last few months, as I've been helping our assistant instructors now, our highest ranks, one of the things I've told them is, when you're standing in front of a class, you have this variety of age and or rank, and everyone has different needs. And so one of the things that I've learned to do fairly well, I think, and something I'm helping my assistant instructors learn, is that you have to be the instructor that each student needs. Whereas on a football team, you can yell and scream, and I know this example breaks down, but you can have one coach running the same thing, and everyone's got to keep up. It's much more of a team effort rather than in the martial arts. It's all an individual journey, individual effort. And so it's difficult. It's more, I would say, it's more difficult to be a martial arts instructor because you have to be an instructor to each different person rather than just the team as a whole.
Right. If we continue the football analogy, it would be like running blocking drills at the same time that you've got other people doing kick returns, place kicks, and you're running plays and defense, and you've got everybody doing slightly or dramatically different drills at the same time. It's chaos. Right. But
yeah.
That's a typical martial arts class, isn't it? It tends to happen that way. Because that's what we've got to do. So if you can suspend this idea, these standards that you've applied for yourself, right? Do what you can with what you have where you're at. If we get rid of those standards, if we say that when you're teaching, you're going to teach the best you can, and you're going to give yourself some time during the week to train on your own, to do things that maybe a balance between things that you enjoy and things that you need to work on. If things shift towards that, what might that look like? Talk about the time commitment that might be there. How many hours are you teaching? How many hours might you be training? And there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, the instinct here is to if you ask me this question and be like, oh, I don't want to, I don't want it to seem like, I'm not training enough, so I'm going to kind of fudge those numbers a little bit. No, just there's no right or wrong. And here's why there's no wrong. Because anybody that spent a lot of time teaching, including you, knows you learn a tremendous amount teaching.
Yeah.
You learn different aspects of martial arts. It doesn't always, it's hard to learn new material and new things when you're teaching, but you refine and you develop and further understand what you've already learned so substantially.
Yeah. And even to continue that, there's been times where I'm trying to show a student a technique or a kick or something, and they do it better than I have. And I thought, wow, I just learned something from you. And that's been really cool. But I don't keep a strict schedule or strict track of how much training I do outside of class time. I just do as much as I can when I can, because I also work, and I have those commitments too. And sometimes I come home from work and I'm really tired. I don't want to train, but you hit on something interesting. I don't know if you did that intentionally or not, but to work on things, either the things that I enjoy or the things that I need to work on. And that's also a big part of my training, my personal training is, do I just do what I know I'm good at? And, I enjoy this form, or do I do some, sparring practice, or I hit the bag because I enjoy that
I know I'm good at it, or do I really knuckle down and work on, for me, my flexibility and my hip mobility? I'm terrible at that. And for me, stretching and doing these mobility exercises, they hurt. And I think part of that is because I'm so inflexible. Um, and part of it is just that doing all the other sports, I've not needed to stretch for flexibility before. Needed to stretch to warm up and to stretch for power, but that's different. And so um, part of being my own worst critic, I think, is uh, finding the thing that I'm worst at and trying to improve that. And so I guess that would be one benefit of being my own worst critic, is that I do tend to work on the things that I'm worst at, because I don't want to be bad at those things, especially as an instructor. I don't want to be up in front of my class and say, you need to do this, and I can't do it myself. And so my personal training, I would say probably, oh man, it's hard to put numbers on it, but
It's okay.
I feel like I have a good balance of doing what I'm good at and enjoy, and doing what I'm not good at, because I want to be good at everything. And I want to improve myself in all areas.
Right. And I think that balance is important, right? I mean, the whole subject here, we're talking about balancing. We're talking about your teaching. We're talking about your own training and that struggle of that balance. And I think it's important to have, for your own training, things that you really enjoy and things that you need to work on. Because if you're only working on the things that you need to work on, your association with that training time isn't going to be positive. It's probably going to be neutral, maybe even negative.
Yeah.
Because now you're reinforcing that your martial arts training is exclusively things that you are not so good at. And what do we know about most people and the things that they're not good at? They don't generally enjoy them.
Right. Right. And
We can enjoy the process in getting better if there is an endpoint. Imagine that you pick up skateboarding. Skateboarding, I tried for about a minute when I was a kid. Wasn't my thing. But anybody out there who's been a skateboarder knows when you're new to it, it hurts a lot and it hurts all the time.
mm-hmm.
Imagine that the moment you get any competency on a skateboard, you say, okay, now I'm going to work on a unicycle. And once you get that, now you're on rollerblades and now you're on a pogo stick. I bet half the people out there don't know what a pogo stick is. And that becomes your physical practice, is working on these skills that always hurt. How long are you going to continue that?
Not very long.
That's not
Yeah.
fun. So if you're balancing it out, if you're doing whatever ratio you need, let's say you're going to train for 20 minutes and you spend 10 minutes working on some things you really enjoy. Maybe you're hitting the bag. And then the other 10 minutes, maybe you're working on a form that just doesn't do it for you. Maybe you put 5 minutes on the bag before and then you work on the form, and then 5 minutes after. You bookend it. You mix it up. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've talked about, and we've not done a formal announcement because we're still kind of figuring it out, but you and I suspect a number of the listeners have caught wind of the 2-minute martial arts programming that we've been doing. This idea that it's, you get better at things through frequency more than just trying to lump all that time together.
Mm-hmm.
You take that same, let's say you've got 2 hours a week to train on your own, and you split it up across 7 days. It's easier to find those smaller blocks of time. And if you're working on the same things, let's face it, how often do you want to sit and work on the same thing for an hour? Not too often, but you can work on it 10 minutes every day. That's a lot more approachable. And then at the end of a few weeks, you go, wow, I've really progressed here. Because just the way the brain learns, the way those neural pathways are conditioned and expand, frequency is a huge component of that. We've talked about that a little bit on the show. And Think about the things that we do every day. We get pretty good at them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the 2-minute martial arts training. I see those just about every day, and it's really cool because a lot of the things that you guys put out on that, I already do, and the things that I see that I don't do, I add those to my training. And a big part of my personal training, I feel very lucky and blessed to be able to call this part of my training, is that as I drive in my truck, I listen to your podcast, which is how I've been able to listen to so many so quickly. As I listen to tons as I drive, and I don't listen just for the entertainment value, but I listen for what I can learn. And your self-defense drill, I think you call it Dark Alley.
Yep.
We've taken that, we use that in our class, and that's an amazing drill. It's an amazing tool. And so I not only listen, but I'll research and read and watch videos on YouTube. And the guys who are putting out good stuff, I take from it and I learn from it and add it to my own training. And the times that I do train the areas that are difficult for me, like in stretching, or in holding a kick, it's hard. My legs are sore afterwards. But then the next time I go, if I see a little bit of improvement, oh my goodness, that's amazing. It gives me, that much more motivation to keep doing it. And that the hard work that I've been doing isn't useless, isn't fruitless.
Right. Effort is never useless. It might not be the most effective thing that you could do, but it, at the very least, keeps you from backsliding more, right? Anything with, I'm sure if we really, really dug, we could come up with a counterexample, but anything you do is better than nothing.
Right.
So try to let go of that. I've talked to a lot of people, and I see a lot of people who set these really high expectations for themselves, and they're constantly moving the bar up and up and up. And they're missing out on the process. They're missing out on the enjoyable part. And when you talk to people who've been training a long time, and I mean 20, 30, 60 years, they enjoy the process. If you've been training for 60 years, you're probably not at your physical peak. It's pretty unlikely. So if your motivation for training is to get better, better, better always, and hold these really high standards and keep moving that bar up, eventually you're going to see your distance from that bar increase. And when people do that, they stop training. When people see that they're never going to accomplish the goal that they set out, they'll stop trying. So everyone's goal is different, right? And identifying what that goal is becomes really important. My goal with my training is to just keep enjoying it. There are plenty of skills I have that have stagnated. There are others that I've learned. In order for me to continue to move forward with everything that I have learned, at points, I would be training 24 hours a day. I've trained in way too many schools. I've learned too many things. There's no way I could continue to get better at all of it. My brain would explode.
Yeah.
So there goes that goal, right? Like there's no way I can hold myself to that standard. So what's the standard? The standard for me is I'm going to keep enjoying and finding ways to progress at something. And I've accepted, I had to accept years ago that there are aspects of my training that will stagnate. There are things that I do not do as well now that I used to do.
Yeah. And I know as I train myself to be better so I can teach better, as I have learned how to teach more, to cater my teaching to whoever my student is, I've learned that everyone's standard is different, including my own. And so I can't hold, a 9-year-old yellow belt to the same standard that I have. Everyone's goals are different. Everyone's abilities are different. And, like you said, when somebody sees the distance from their ability to that bar increase, they quit. And one of the things that, I've heard a lot of people on your show say is that one of the main goals of martial arts class needs to be fun, enjoyment, because they can be the best student there is, but if they don't enjoy it, they're not going to come back. And, I know as for you, as long as you've been in the martial arts, you've seen this. I've seen this in the different sports arenas I've been in, that you have a guy who's really good, maybe even one of the best on the team, but he doesn't enjoy it, so he quits. And for somebody like me, it's like I would give anything just to be half as good as him because I love it, but he doesn't. Right. And so for myself, I've learned to, make it fun, not only in class for my students and for everyone else, but for myself at home as well. And, I have 3 young kids right now. They're 3, 5, and 7. And one of the things that we do is we taught out of our garage for like 4 years. And we've been at a different location now for classes for about a year and a half. And our garage is still set up as our dojo because we train at home and occasionally we'll teach classes at our house. And we'll just have kata parties in our garage where we'll take turns doing katas or sparring or, wrestling around on the ground. And, I'll call that, groundwork for karate. And we have fun as a family. We get in there and we make it fun. And it's half being a good dad and half disguising, karate work as fun,
And to me,
And so,
that's the key. One of the things that I do, so, in my role with Whistlekick, I have the opportunity to travel around and sometimes, I'll visit schools and am often invited to teach. I don't know these people. I don't know their background. I don't always know, what their skills are. So what's my goal? My goal is that they have fun
Mhm.
because it doesn't matter what you're teaching. It doesn't matter how revolutionary it is. It doesn't matter how skilled a teacher you are. If the people you are teaching are not enjoying their time, they will not internalize that information.
Right.
Think back to the academic classes that you've had. You learned the most from the teachers you enjoyed.
Absolutely.
So I will whenever I'm teaching, I build the foundation of fun. If it's fun, they'll learn. Or I should say, if it's fun, they might learn. So I make sure I have fun because if you're having fun, they will probably have fun. If you're not having fun, they will probably take advantage of that to create their own fun.
Yes.
Especially if they're children, right? I think we've all seen that.
Uh-huh.
So where is the fun? So if we look at this notion of balancing teaching with your own personal training through the perspective of fun, how does that change things for you?
I never really thought of it like that before you asked it just now, but
That's my job.
thank you. And you're good at it. I appreciate it. But I think that was a big part of why I was so discouraged as a kid is even though I was good at what I did, my main sports were baseball and football. I was always one of the better kids on the team, but I wasn't, even though I enjoyed playing, I didn't always have fun. And that was, like I said before, due to either my coaches or the other, authority figures around me who I would talk to them about my sports. And that carried over into being an instructor. And my wife will tell you the first few years that I was teaching, I was not an enjoyable instructor. Um, And she very graciously would talk to me afterwards and say, "Hey, why did you say it like that to this little girl? She's 5. Like, she can't even tie her own shoes yet. You know, if we need, if X is our standard for yellow belt, her next rank, she's not going to perform like a 13-year-old at a yellow belt level. If she needs a little bit more help, great. We don't want to discourage her to where she never comes back." And it took me a few years, and I feel like a lot of covering by my wife, for me to learn that and to not scare away kids. I don't think I scared away any from our school, but um, I remember the day that we had that one conversation, and it changed my mentality about that. And it's like, a 5-year-old girl isn't going to have perfect form. And just because I taught her these 4 techniques one time doesn't mean she's going to remember them perfectly for the rest of her life. I need to make it fun and have realistic expectations.
Right.
And that's what I've grown in over the years. And, I've had a lot more fun these past 2 years. And consequently, everyone else around me has had a lot more fun, made things more enjoyable for everyone, as I learned to have fun and to make it fun for everyone else.
Right.
So thank you for asking that question. That was very, very insightful.
Of course. And, it's pretty clear, when you're disciplining a 5-year-old or setting a standard for them that's a little bit too high, it's clear where that's coming from. That's learned behavior. And very, very few martial arts instructors are taught how to be martial arts instructors. We're taught how to be martial artists. We have to figure out the instruction part. And where do we get that? We get it from the people that we learn from. Well, not all of those people are great instructors. Not all those people want to be better instructors. So we've got to experiment. We've got to, this is where I think learning from multiple people and taking what works and what you want to use in your own instruction style. The way I teach kids is different than the way I teach adults. It's different from the way I teach a mixed group. The way I'm going to teach a taekwondo class is different from the way I'm going to teach a karate class. And if I had my own consistent school, the way I would teach that would be dramatically different than when I visit, because the goals are different.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating that you bring up the difference between visiting someone's school or group or seminar or whatever versus having your own, because having your own, you've run the school for, a few years in the past, and, you're with them class after class after class. They know you. But when you go to visit, those people don't necessarily know you. And a story that I took from a substitute public school teacher many years ago is, because he learned that as a substitute, the teacher, when they come back, they're going to reteach everything that you did anyway. So don't stress as a substitute, just go in there and have fun. And he said when he'd go into these schools, even some in pretty rough areas, he wore glasses some of the time. And so when the students came in, he would stand behind his desk with his glasses on with a very stern look on his face. And they would march in, and, of course, they don't know him as a substitute, so they have a little bit more respect for him than their own teacher at first. And so at the beginning of class, he's a little bit more strict, a little bit more harsh. But then by the end of the class, by the end of the day, he's got his guitar out, he's singing, they're laughing, they're playing games together. All while, in between that, of course, teaching the material that he's supposed to. But to be able to have fun, they're going to enjoy the time. They're going to learn more. Like you said, they have a better propensity to learn if they're having fun than if they don't. Than if it's all just material and expectations of learning.
Right. So I think you have this unique opportunity. because you have enough awareness of who you are and you have enough context for what it's like to teach and to learn across multiple things that you can kind of go back and, I'm gonna be a bit, warm fuzzy, playing psychotherapist for a moment, to heal some of the wounds that you experience from your time in sports. You have the opportunity to not pass on that same weight to the students that you're teaching. And in doing so, you have the opportunity to see and enjoy what it's like in another way. And as you do that, and you're already doing that, but be aware of that. And as you're doing that, try to step out of yourself. And if you had a student who is exactly like you, same time availability, same family commitment, same everything, and they came to you and said, I want private instruction, how would you teach them? Because that's the secret for you, for your own personal training. What are you going to do? What reasonable standard are you going to set? Most people will treat other people better than they treat themselves. We're just quiet about it. All the negative self-talk that we experience, it's incredibly rare people treat anyone that poorly. So how do you move forward from that? How do you say, okay, Sensei Gabe, this is you talking to you. This is how much time I have available across a week. I do better with a fixed schedule, or maybe I do better when I have these kind of impromptu 10 minutes that I can grab. What should I do? What if you sat down once a week with your instructor / wife at the table and you guys spent 5 minutes coming up with what student Gabe was going to work on for the week? I think there are a lot of ways that if you look at this a little bit more formally, the way that you would handle anyone else's instruction, I think this becomes a little bit simpler. Not easy, but simpler. You know what you need to work on. You know what you want to work on. And I think you know how to balance the two. I think the challenge here is that because you have full control, it's overwhelming. People don't like to make the wrong choice. So people will instinctively make no choice when they are unsure of a clear path. And I think that that's part of what's going on here. Because you could train 0 minutes a week or 20 hours and neglect sleep and family and everything else. There's a lot of room in between.
Yeah. That's a really good way to look at things. Thank you for that. I'd not really considered things from that perspective before. But as you've picked up from the stories I've told, I have grown a lot, and I've seen the growth. I've seen the problems that I had, especially the worst of it, the thick of it was about 4 years ago or so. In my color belt ranks, I was really down on myself. There's even times I just wanted to quit. And of course, that didn't make my wife happy at all. And we struggled through that. And she knows me better. My wife knows me better than anyone else in the world. She knows that I'm my own worst critic. She knows that I will work on my own to improve the things I need to. And so a lot of her advice to me back in those days was, listen to me. Let me encourage you. Believe me. Believe the encouragement that you're getting from me and from these other people. And psychologically, mentally, it was my problem. It was a mental problem. It wasn't a physical problem or a time problem necessarily, although there was a time for about 8 months to a year where I was working so much, I physically didn't have time to train. But to be able to uh, allow myself to be encouraged and to allow someone else to change my mind, I think is a way that I hadn't allowed someone, specifically my wife, Jenny, hadn't allowed her into my life and my martial arts training that way before.
Hmm.
And so that was a tough period. But then, I was working a little bit less and I was able to train more, and I got a little bit better at things. And um, especially over this last 6 months or so, um, things have really improved for me as a practitioner, as a student, and as an instructor. And it's been really neat to see that improvement, to see that growth from the time when I was a white and yellow belt and I thought, oh, this is just something fun to do, to the time where it's like, whoa, this is getting serious, but I don't have time to commit to the training like I want to, up to now where things are, very serious. We have a pretty big school by most standards, um, training 3 to 4 days a week, and traveling 4 or 5 times a year for tournaments, and things are just incredible now.
Awesome. Here, we've talked a bit about, some kind of more psychological ways to look at this, but as we wind down here, let's look at some practical ways. I'm going to assume that outside of your wife, you're the highest ranking student in the school.
Yes.
Who's the next highest? Like what age and rank are they?
There's 2 guys. One is 14 and one is 12, and they
Okay.
are both second-degree red belts.
Okay.
So they're pretty high.
Okay. Old enough and high enough rank that they can start to put together some teaching.
Yes.
Right?
Mhm.
Depending on the culture of a school, not all schools are going to be able to handle this, but depending on the culture of the school, I don't think there's anything wrong with you jumping in while they teach. Especially if you give them some parameters of things that you want to work on. We talk on the show a lot about the white belt mentality. What better way to exemplify that than to say, hey, teach this stuff. I want to train.
Yeah. That's
And
a
of course,
really
they'll fall
good idea.
on their face, but they get the benefit of learning those things. Again, if you've taught it, you're going to learn it that much better through teaching it. So make them teach the things that you stink at the most. And maybe they're not going to be able to do high rank forms or things like that, but I'm sure there are things that you want to work on. And what's really fun about different people teaching is they all teach differently. So as you already said, sometimes you teach someone something that they find something different in it and you learn from them. Well, there's no reason not to continue that. And what I really like about that for the schools that are willing to do it is it completely changes the culture. It stops being this very top-down hierarchy and it becomes this more collaborative process. And the irony of that is that everyone gets better much faster.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, because they help us teach a lot. Being a fairly young school, we we've called on our oldest and highest ranks for a few years now, and we'll give them a few students here and there, or even sometimes we'll give them a big group of students, and I'll kind of step back and watch them and help them if they need it. But to totally flip things around and to stand on the other side of the room, that would be completely different.
Yeah. Other things that you can do, um, training in another school. I mean, that doesn't help with the time constraint stuff, but working on things that are completely different somehow improves the other stuff. I don't always understand how, but sometimes when I'm training my Kempo stuff, it makes my Taekwondo better. I don't know why. It just does. Probably
Yeah.
because the human body is the human body. And I'm thinking about, okay, I'm in this class. I've got to move in this way, which reinforces how not to move slightly when I'm back in a different class. I think that one is more for the mental and the emotional side than it is the physical side, but there's still value.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got video. That doesn't solve the time problem. It doesn't solve the necessarily the motivation, the fun problem, but you're a good enough teacher to watch yourself and critique yourself. And to anyone out there, if you are not, if you have a routine of self practice, individualized practice, and you are not routinely videoing what you're doing and checking it, I think you're missing out. Because
Yeah.
most of us are our own worst critics. But if you do it in a positive way, do a form, video it, look at it. Wow, look at all these things I can work on, but also look at all these things I did well.
Hmm. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I try to get as much video, especially from tournaments, as possible, so I can go back and analyze and critique myself. And especially in the last year, as I've taken video of myself and watched it, I'll think to myself, oh, I felt pretty good about that. I know this wasn't good, but that was good. I'll go back and watch, and it was completely different. It looked completely different from how it felt. And that's
Mm.
incredibly valuable. Even just, it was the other night, I was working on my newest form, and my wife took video of me. I wanted to see what particular sequence looked like. And watching it showed me that, okay, my sequence was okay, but what I need to work on was my stances and my transition and my lower body. I was like, I would have never caught that had it not been for video.
Mm.
So yeah, that's an incredibly good piece of advice.
Cool. And the last thing before we start to sign off, because I'm going to flip this on you. I've given you a bunch of ideas. So now I'm stepping into the class, putting you at the front of the room. You're the teacher. If I came to you with the same challenge and I said, I spend so much of my time teaching, I've got work commitments, I've got family commitments, and I'm struggling to find ways to balance my own teaching with my time instructing. Do you have any ideas? What would you tell me?
That may be the most difficult question you've asked me so far.
That's why it's the one at the end.
um, well, the thing that popped into my head immediately was, as you're teaching, do it with your students. Don't just stand up at the front and bark orders, but to get in there, stand in the middle of them and say, if you're showing them something new, they do it like this, or hey, let's all do this together.
Yeah.
Because
You do
that's one
that?
of the things I have to do.
Do you do that?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So you're knocking out all these repetitions, and you got to, again, that's something else you got to balance, right? Because you can't observe in the same way when you're doing, but modeling behavior is how most people learn,
mhm,
especially children. They want to imitate, they mimic. So to get out there on the floor with them and to do it, maybe you're not going to go as fast as you can because then they're going to prioritize the speed over other things. But
right.
there are, I mean, we've done some episodes with talking about drills and things that you can think about and focus on with, say, forms or with basics. You can always think about something else. You can work on your stances while you're teaching something really simple.
Right.
You don't even have to talk about it. You just do it.
Yeah. One other thing we teach to, especially the newer students, is don't just practice here in the dojo. When you go home, practice things at home. And one of the ways you can do that is, you know, when you're working on a kata stance, take an entire day and just move around in that stance. Do your slide steps or your turning or whatever in that stance.
Mm.
And especially the kids, say, just it'll confuse your parents, and they might think it's funny, but it's a good way to practice. It's just to walk up and down your hallway, in a good kata stance, or if you're a lot of our students are homeschooled, or even if they're not, if they're doing homework, sit in a horse stance while you're reading or watching a movie or something. Work on your leg strength. And if anyone has done this, I think they know that when you're thinking about something else other than the pain and the stress you're putting on your own body, you tend to last longer and do more than you thought you could.
Yeah. And it's funny you bring that up because you brought up flexibility a couple times. So
Yeah.
first off, stretching should never hurt. If it hurts, you're probably pushing too hard. But secondly,
Okay.
people who get the best results from their stretching do it the most often and do it while they're doing something else. And the most prototypical example I can give you is watching TV. If TV is at all part of your life, get on the floor, work on your stretching while you're watching TV. And, the average American home is something like 3 or 4 hours of TV a night. I'm going to guess that you don't have that much time, so you're probably not watching that much TV. But even if it was 30 minutes a day, and that you've got a family, that could become a family routine. Hey, we're going to watch such and such show. Everybody stretch while we do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because we all need more flexibility. We all benefit from it. It's great stuff. So finding those opportunities to commingle regular life with training, I think is pretty great.
Yes. Yes, it is.
So how you feeling?
Good. Man, I'm not sure. I feel better about certain things after having talked to you, and worse about certain things after
Okay.
talking to you. But good. I feel like I keep saying, especially in this last 6 months to a year, I have a much more honest and much more balanced view of teaching and training, and of being hard on learning and technique versus having fun. And so I've learned a lot. I've gotten a lot better at that. At least I think I have. I don't know. You should ask my students. But this has been a very valuable conversation.
Good. And here's the interesting piece about this. This conversation will be available for you to listen to again. So I would say, digest the things that we've talked about. Think about it. Listen to it. Talk to your wife.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect there will be people who will chime in probably on the Facebook group. We don't talk about that often. So listeners, Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio behind the scenes. I think you and Jenny are in there. I think I've seen you guys comment. Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm suspecting that when this episode goes up, which should be next week,
cool.
Other people will chime in and say, I struggle with this too. I like those ideas. Here's something that I do, right? So we get a conversation out of it. So listeners, please, let's get some conversation going on this one and help each other out.
Yeah. Great.
Cool. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for being so open about a challenge you were having. We didn't have to blur your face out or be anonymous.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me on. It's been great to talk about this with someone who, is across the country, and someone who, for you, you've had a lot of experience with this yourself and with talking with other people about it. So I very much appreciate your perspective on it.
Cool. Well, I'm glad we got the chance to talk, and I'm sure we'll talk some more.
Yeah, look forward to it.
We only have 24 hours in a day, and we all spend them differently. But when you have a lot of things that are really important to you, or even just a few, like family, martial arts teaching and martial arts training, plus a job, food, sleep, there isn't really a lot of time left over. And that's the challenge that we talked about today. And it's the challenge that so many of us face. What I hope you get out of this episode, what I hope Sensei Siu takes away from this episode, is that there's no right answer. And that as long as your priorities are lined up and you're addressing them in importance, You're not wrong. So thank you so much, sir, coming on the show, talking to me, and giving me the opportunity to offer my thoughts. If you want to see some photos or transcript, more context for this episode, and maybe learn a little bit about Sensei Siu, head on over to whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. While you're there, sign up for the newsletter. Start following us on social media. We're at whistlekick all over the place. And don't forget, whistlekick.com and the code podcast15. Get yourself a new shirt or maybe a hat, some comfy sweatpants, a new uniform. There's a bunch over there, so check it out. I appreciate the support that everyone shows to the company, to me personally. It means the world. If you want to email me directly, jeremy@whistlekick.com. I read every single email I get. That's all I've got for you today. Until next time, train hard, smile, and have a great day.